I'm Captain Alexandra Reyes, 44 years old, and for 25 years I've served this country from the bridge of a warship. But when my own mother introduced me to my sister's fiancé as the disappointment, and that Marine captain's hand shot halfway into a salute before he caught himself, that was the night everything changed. Have you ever been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to be in your corner? If that's you, stay with me. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your worth after being written off by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe. What happened after that half salute might surprise you. I've been in San Diego for 6 weeks, buried in pre-deployment workups, when my sister Brianna called to tell me she was engaged. Again. His name's Marcus, she said, breathless the way she always got when she was excited about something new. Marcus Hale. Force Recon Alex, like actual Marine Corps Force Recon, not a desk guy. I was standing on the weather deck of my ship, the USS Cordell, watching the sun drop behind the breakwater at Naval Base San Diego. Below me, sailors moved through their evening routine, line handlers coiling rope, a petty officer running a flashlight check along the lifelines, 340 of them under my command. Every one of them mattered to me the way a limb matters. I'm happy for you, Bri, I said, and I meant it, even though some small, tired part of me flinched at not a desk guy. Mom's already planning the engagement party. She wants you there. She was very specific. Dress appropriately. No uniform this time, she said, and I quote, "We don't need another scene." I let that sit for a second before I answered, "I'll be there." Good. A pause. He the real catch, Alex. Deployed 4 times already. Still makes time for family. Mom won't shut up about it. I didn't correct her. I'd learned a long time ago that correcting my mother or my sister when she was channeling my mother only led to circular arguments where facts got rearranged until I was somehow the unreasonable one. The truth was, I'd deployed 6 times myself, coordinated carrier strike group movements through contested waters, briefed 2-star admirals on readiness postures that determined whether 4,000 sailors came home safely. But to my family, if you weren't kicking down a door somewhere, you weren't really in the fight. Looking forward to meeting him, I said. Just be normal, okay? Mom's stressed enough. After we hung up, I stood at the rail a while longer. My phone buzzed. A group text, the family thread, lit up with 17 new messages about venues and centerpieces. I scrolled up. The conversation had started 3 weeks earlier. Nobody had thought to add me until my father noticed my name missing and did it himself. I put the phone away and went back to the readiness report on my desk. 18 systems checks, 4 discrepancies flagged, 1 maintenance chief who needed a hard conversation in the morning, precise work, consequential work, the kind of work that kept people alive. That night in my stateroom, I pulled my dress whites out of the garment bag and pressed them myself, even though the ship's laundry could have done it in 20 minutes. There was something steadying about the ritual, the hiss of the iron, the crease forming sharp and clean under the heat, the transformation of rumpled fabric into something that meant something. My executive officer, Commander Priya Shah, found me in the wardroom that evening over reheated coffee. "You've got that look," she said. "The one you get before a family thing. My sister's getting married. 3rd time." Priya raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Her fiancé's a Force Recon captain. My mother's convinced he's the first person in the family to do anything real. Priya nearly choked on her coffee. "You command a Ticonderoga-class cruiser. 340 sailors. You've briefed flag officers on straight transits through contested waters. She thinks I do paperwork. Does she know you made captain below the zone? Twice? She knows what she wants to know." I folded the last crease into my trousers. I'm going to show up, be respectful, and let people draw their own conclusions. That's very diplomatic of you. I'm tired of fighting for space in my own family. Then why go at all? It was a fair question. I'd asked myself the same thing while I packed. The answer, when it came, was simple and a little embarrassing. Because some part of me still thinks that one day they'll actually see me. I'm not ready to give up on that yet. Priya lifted her mug. "To family. May they eventually get a clue." I clinked my mug against hers and, for the first time all week, I really laughed. The flight to San Diego's north side, where my parents still lived, took 40 minutes by car once I landed. I was already home port, which made the whole thing feel closer, more inescapable somehow. I drove to the country club with my dress whites hanging in the back seat, debating the entire way whether to change first. I want to explain something here because a few people have asked me about this since why I chose to wear the uniform at all. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a chess move. On a ship, in port, at any Navy function, dress whites are simply what I wear. I don't own a closet full of cocktail dresses because I don't attend cocktail parties. I attend changes of command, promotion ceremonies, memorial services. The uniform isn't a costume I put on to make a point. It's the truth of who I am, and that night, for the first time in years, I decided I wasn't going to shrink that truth down to fit into somebody else's story about me. I parked at the back of the lot, away from the valet line, and sat for a moment before I went in. Through the tall windows, I could see people gathering. My sister's friends, my mother's social circle, men in expensive suits, women in cocktail dresses shimmering under the chandeliers. Somewhere in there was Captain Marcus Hale, the man my mother had already decided represented real military service. I checked my ribbons one last time, made sure my cupper sat straight, and walked in. The country club smelled like lilies and candle wax. My heels clicked against the marble as I crossed the lobby toward the private dining room. I heard my family before I saw them. Laughter, the clink of glasses, my mother's voice carrying above the rest with that particular performative brightness she reserved for an audience. When I stepped into the doorway, nobody turned. I stood there a moment, taking it in. Round tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus, and at the head table my sister Brianna in pale blue, glowing. My mother saw me first. Her smile hardened into something brittle. "Oh," she said, loud enough for the tables nearest us to hear, "you actually came. A beat." Then, to the room, "Everyone, this is my disappointment of a daughter." The words landed the way they always did, like something sharp dragged slowly across skin. I kept my face still. I'd learned years ago that any visible reaction was exactly what she wanted. Something she could either milk for sympathy or wave off as me being sensitive, depending on her audience. A ripple of laughter went through the room. Not cruel exactly, more the nervous kind people make when someone says something uncomfortable in public and nobody's sure how to respond. Brianna looked down at her plate. Not embarrassed for me, I realized. Embarrassed of me. "This is the one who's never given me grandchildren," my mother continued, emboldened now. "Too busy playing Navy." More laughter, lighter this time. I walked toward the head table, my pace even, my spine straight. "Brianna," I said. She stood, came around, hugged me, brief, stiff. "So glad you could make it," she said in a tone that suggested the opposite. "Congratulations," I said. "I'm happy for you." "This is Captain Marcus Hale," my mother interjected, gesturing to the man beside my sister. "Real military, not office military, like you." He stood, tall, broad through the shoulders, the kind of weathered look that comes from years outdoors in bad weather doing worse things. His eyes were sharp, assessing, the way officers' eyes get after enough time in the field. He extended his hand. "Ma'am," he said, polite, unbothered. "Good to meet you." His gaze moved over my uniform the way you'd glance at wallpaper, the polite disinterest of someone meeting a stranger at a social function he'd rather not be at. Then his eyes caught the single silver star pinned to my shoulder boards, the insignia every officer in every branch is trained to recognize on sight, whether they expect to see it at a country club engagement party or not. I watched the recognition land. His hand, halfway extended for a second shake, froze, his eyes widened. Color drained from his face, and for 1/2 second his right arm actually began to rise, the pure muscle memory of a man who has saluted senior officers 10,000 times before his brain caught up with the fact that he was standing in a suit. Not a uniform at a private party and a salute in civilian clothes isn't proper form at all. His arm stopped halfway, hovered awkwardly, then dropped. His heels came together instead, sharp and audible against the marble. His spine went rigid. "Captain Reyes," he said, his voice suddenly carrying across the now very silent room. "Ma'am, my apologies. I didn't recognize you out of context." The laughter died mid-breath. A fork stopped halfway to someone's mouth. Somewhere behind me, a wineglass was set down too hard, the small clink of it unnaturally loud. "At ease, Captain?" I said quietly. He didn't relax, not really. His face had gone from confident to something close to mortified in about 3 seconds. Behind him, 3 other men in suits, his teammates, I'd learn later, were staring at me with wide eyes and the particular stillness of men trying to figure out exactly how badly their friend had just stepped in it. My mother's mouth had fallen open. She looked from me to Marcus and back, visibly trying to reconcile what she'd just watched with the story she'd spent years building. "She outranks you," someone whispered from a nearby table. Not quietly enough. Marcus pulled out the chair beside my sister. "Please, ma'am, sit." "Thank you, Captain." I sat, placed my cover on the table beside my plate, and let the silence stretch. I could feel the recalibration happening around me in real time, a room full of people doing rapid math on who I actually was. One of Marcus's teammates leaned forward. "Captain Reyes? Cordell, right?" "Pacific Fleet." "That's right." "Sorry, ma'am. We studied your straight transit last year. The one through the contested corridor. 4 ships, 0 incidents. That briefing's required reading at Coronado." "That was a team effort," I said. "Good sailors, good planning." "It was brilliant," he said. "You should have heard how they talked about it." Marcus, recovering slightly, sat down beside Brianna, who still hadn't said a word. "Ma'am, I apologize again. I had incomplete information." "It's fine, Captain." I unfolded my napkin, placed it in my lap. It wasn't fine, and everyone at that table knew it, but there was no version of this evening that benefited from me saying so out loud. My mother finally found her voice. "You never told us you made captain." I looked at her directly. "I've held this command for 2 years, Mom. Before that, I was XO on a destroyer for 3. It was in the Union Tribune. I sent you the article." "I thought that was a different Alexandra Reyes," she said weakly. It wasn't. Brianna reached for her wine glass, her hand not quite steady. Marcus put his hand over hers. "How long have you been in?" one of the other Marines asked. 25 years, since the academy." "What's your specialty?" "Surface warfare, fleet operations." The questions kept coming, and I answered them simply, without elaboration, without performance. But each answer was another quiet correction to the story my mother had spent 2 decades telling about who I was. Dinner arrived, but no one really ate. Conversation fractured into small pockets of whispered discussion. I caught fragments. "I didn't know." She never said. How did we not know? My mother sat at the head of the table, pushing food around her plate, saying almost nothing. Brianna kept glancing at me like I'd turned into someone she'd never met. By the time dessert came out, the whole atmosphere of the room had shifted. People were asking me real questions, treating me with the kind of easy respect I got every single day at work and almost never got here. My mother, meanwhile, sat diminished at the head of a table that had, 5 minutes earlier, been entirely hers. I excused myself before coffee. "Early morning tomorrow," I said, which was true enough. Marcus stood immediately. "Ma'am, thank you for coming, and congratulations, Brianna." I used my sister's future married name lightly, trying for a small joke. She didn't smile. My father walked me to my car. He'd been quiet all evening, watching everything with those careful eyes of his that never miss much. "You handled that well," he said. "Did I have a choice?" "You always have a choice. You chose dignity." I hugged him, and for a second I was 8 years old again, sitting on his shoulders at an air show, watching the blue angels carve lines across the sky. "Your mother," he started, then stopped himself. "She doesn't know how to be wrong. Never has." "I know. Give her time." I nodded, but I wasn't sure time would fix something that stubborn. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without understanding where it started. My father, Walter Reyes, retired as a Master Chief Petty Officer, E9, the highest enlisted rank in the Navy. 30 years of service, decades of quiet competence that never once needed an audience. He worked on aircraft engines most of his career, came home smelling like jet fuel and grease, and never once told my sister or me what to be. He just showed us, by example, what it looked like to serve with your whole self and never brag about it. My mother, Diane, grew up with almost nothing, and the Navy gave her stability she'd never had as a kid. But to her, it was always a means to an end, a stepping stone towards something she considered more respectable. She wanted daughters who married well, threw dinner parties, filled photo albums with the right kind of pictures. The Navy paid the bills. It was never supposed to be the point of anyone's life, least of all her daughters. Brianna was born beautiful. Not a subjective observation, just a fact everyone around her confirmed constantly. Strangers stopped my mother in grocery stores to comment on her. By high school, Brianna had learned exactly how to use that. Homecoming court, a boyfriend who played varsity everything, photo albums full of parties. I was born curious. I took apart radios to see how they worked. I read my father's old technical manuals for fun, and by middle school I was tagging along to change of command ceremonies just to watch the order of it, how everyone knew exactly their place and their purpose. When I told my mother I wanted to apply to the Naval Academy, she laughed, not cruelly, dismissively. "Honey, you don't have to do that. You're smart. You could marry someone successful." "I want my own success," I told her. "That's not how the world works for women," she said. I applied anyway. My father ran beside me at 5 in the morning before school for months, helping me train for the physical fitness test, never saying much, his present support enough all on its own. I got in, top scores, a congressional nomination, the whole thing. When my acceptance letter came, my father put it on the refrigerator. My mother took it down the next day. Said it cluttered the kitchen. Brianna went to cosmetology school instead, opened her own salon by 22. Married a real estate developer at 23 in a wedding that cost more than my first 2 years of active duty pay combined. Exactly the wedding my mother had always wanted for her. I missed it. I was deployed to the Arabian Gulf on a mission I still can't fully discuss even now. Managing a crisis that kept 3 ships and thousands of sailors safe during a tense stretch none of them ever heard about on the news. I tried to explain that to Brianna. To her, it didn't matter. Her sister hadn't shown up for the most important day of her life, and no operational justification was going to change how that felt to her. That marriage lasted 3 years. Through my 20s and 30s, I became, without ever asking for the role, the family's emergency fund. Brianna needed rent money after the divorce. I sent it. My mother's car broke down. I paid for the repair. My father needed a procedure his insurance didn't fully cover. I covered the rest. Every crisis in that family eventually flowed through my checking account, and I never really minded. I made good money and lived simply. But the gratitude, when it came at all, arrived thin and conditional, wrapped in comments like, "Must be nice to have all that disposable income," or, "If you had a real family, you'd understand what expenses actually look like." When I made lieutenant commander at 32, I called to share the news. My mother answered, then I heard her turn to someone in the room. "Alex got another promotion. That's nice, I guess." Another promotion, like I was collecting stamps. My second marriage, Brianna's second, happened while I was on deployment in the South China Sea, executive officer aboard a destroyer responsible for over 300 sailors and a weapons system worth billions. I slept 4 hours a night and loved almost every minute of it. Brianna married a dentist that time in a small ceremony. "Immediate family only," she told me when I called. I was immediate family. Apparently not the right kind. That one lasted 5 years. When I made commander at 36, the local paper ran a small piece. I sent it to my mother. "Nice. We're proud," she texted back. She never mentioned it to a single friend. It was as if that part of my life existed in a separate dimension that simply didn't count toward the version of me she'd already decided on. I made captain at 41, below the zone, a rank a lot of officers never reach at all. It came with command of an entire ship and everyone on it. I stood watch on the bridge and made decisions that carried real weight for real people. I briefed senior officers on strategic posture. My mother asked when I was going to settle down. My father was different. He never said much, but I'd catch him sometimes reading articles about my command online. Once, at a family barbecue, one of his old Navy buddies asked what I'd been up to. My father's whole face lit up. "She's commanding a cruiser now, one of the youngest in her year group to get that assignment." My mother cut in before he could say another word. "Let's not talk shop. Brianna just got her salon certified organic." The pattern never really changed. Every success I earned got minimized, redirected, or quietly erased. Every difficulty Brianna faced got elevated to crisis status, worthy of the whole family's full attention. I paid $12,000 toward renovating Brianna's salon. She thanked me by telling a friend, in front of me, "Must be nice not to have real expenses." I funded $15,000 of my parents' kitchen remodel. My mother showed it off to her friends and mentioned, almost as an aside, that her successful daughter, the one with the salon, had made it possible. When I made captain and took command of the Cordell, the ceremony was formal, attended by senior fleet leadership. My father flew up for it and stood in the back in his old retired chief's dress blues, tears in his eyes the whole time. My mother had a hair appointment. I sent her photos afterward. She wrote back, "Looks windy up there." I stopped expecting more from her a long time ago. I built my life instead around the people who actually valued me, the sailors I trained, the officers I served beside, the mission that gave my life its shape and meaning. But I never stopped showing up to family events, never stopped calling on birthdays, never stopped being present in whatever limited way they'd let me be, because somewhere underneath 25 years of quiet disappointment, some part of me still believed that family was supposed to mean something more than this. The engagement dinner cracked that belief right down the middle. Not because of the insult itself. I'd absorbed worse over the years and kept my footing. It was the certainty in my mother's voice that broke something. She believed it completely, despite everything I'd built, everything I'd given, every version of myself I'd contorted trying to be enough. I was never going to be enough because I'd failed the one test she'd actually been grading me on the whole time. I hadn't become the daughter she'd wanted. And that night, with Marcus's half-finished salute still hanging somewhere in the air behind me, I understood something I should have understood years earlier. I didn't need to be. My father called me 2 days later, before I'd said a word to anyone about what came next. "You know your mother's been talking about the party to everyone," he said. "Says it like she meant for it to happen that way." I figured. She complains about Brianna's third marriage costing more than her house is worth, and in the same breath, she asks you when you'll settle down and give her a grandchild. You want to know something? I asked her about that once, straight out. Bree's on husband number 3, with no kids in sight, and Diane's never once brought that up to her face. But you, who's given this family every dollar you've ever had spare, get asked about grandchildren like it's a debt you owe. I told her, "That's not fair, Diane. That's not even logical." He paused. She didn't have an answer. I sat with that for a moment, grateful, not for the first time, that my father had always been the one member of my family capable of seeing straight lines where everyone else saw whatever story suited them. "Thanks, Dad. I should have said it years ago, to her and to you." After we hung up, I drafted an email. It took me 3 hours and 7 attempts to land the tone right, not angry, not wounded, just clear. "Mom and Bree, I love you both, but I need to step back from family events for a while. The dynamic isn't healthy for me right now, and I don't think my presence adds anything positive for either of you as things stand. I'll be here when you're ready to talk honestly. Take care, Alex." I read it 20 times before I hit send. I left the family group chat quietly, without a scene, without a single passive-aggressive word, because if there's one thing I wanted to be clear about even to myself, is that this wasn't a performance either. It wasn't a punishment designed to make anyone feel a particular way. It was just the truth, stated plainly, the same way I'd state any operational reality to my crew. Within a week, I had 37 missed messages. I read none of them, not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Whitfield knocked on my stateroom door. We'd gone through the academy together, and she'd since made her career in the JAG Corps. "Got a minute, Captain? Always for you." She dropped into the chair across from my desk, ran a hand through her hair. "One of your junior officers came to me. A personnel matter. I can't go into details, but it touches on a fitness report you signed off on. I need your account of the timeline." For the next 20 minutes, we worked through it together. Dates, documentation, the careful, unglamorous machinery of doing things by the book so that nobody's career gets torched by a bad process later. It was the kind of work nobody sees, nobody writes articles about, nobody's mother ever hears about at a dinner party. But it was real, and it mattered, and by the time Sarah left, satisfied she had what she needed, I felt something settle in me that I hadn't felt in weeks. This was my life. Whatever anyone else believed about it. 6 weeks after the engagement dinner, my phone rang. "Brianna." I stared at her name through 3 rings before I answered. "Alex. Bry. Can we talk? Really talk. Not like before." I waited. Marcus left for a training rotation, 3 weeks, no contact. I thought I understood what that was like because of you, but I didn't. I don't know where he is. I don't know if he's safe. I don't know when I'll hear from him again. A pause. "Is that what it was always like for you?" "Yes. And we never asked. We just made jokes. About you running off. About you choosing the Navy over us." I said nothing. "There wasn't much to say to that." "I'm sorry," she said, quiet now. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I didn't understand. I didn't even try to understand." The apology sat in the space between us. I turned it over carefully, the way you'd examine a report you weren't sure you trusted yet. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally. Mom's different since the dinner. Since the article ran again, she tells everyone about you now. But it's like she's trying to convince them she always knew, always supported you. It's easier than admitting she was wrong. Were we really that bad? I could have softened it. Made it easier for both of us. I decided I was done doing that. Yes, I said. You were. She was quiet a long moment. I don't know how to fix it. I'm not sure it can be fixed quickly. Maybe not at all. But we're sisters. That's biology, I said. Not the same thing as a relationship. I heard her breath catch, like she might cry. Part of me wanted to fall back into the old pattern, to comfort her the way I always had. A bigger part. The part built over 25 years of learning to hold a line when it mattered, stayed steady instead. I have to go, I said. Brief, in 10 minutes. Okay. She sounded defeated. Alex? Yeah, for what it's worth. I'm really proud of you. I should have said that years ago. Thank you. That evening, I had dinner with Ensign Jasmine Cole, one of the junior officers in the mentorship program I ran for women coming up through the fleet. She was 24, smart with logistics, and convinced she didn't belong. Everyone else seems so much more confident than I feel, she said, picking at her food. They're not, I told her. They're just better at faking it. You always seem so sure of yourself. That's practice and rank. The higher you go, the less room there is to show doubt, even when you feel it plenty. She looked down. My family doesn't really get why I joined. They wanted me to be a doctor, something they could explain easily to people. Let me guess. They think military service is what you do when you couldn't do anything else. Her eyes went wide. How did you know? Because some families can't imagine anyone choosing this on purpose. That we might see serving as an honor, not a fallback. Does it ever get better? With them? I thought about it honestly. Sometimes, sometimes not. Either way, you can't build your choices around their approval. Here's what took me 25 years to learn. The people who can't see your value aren't actually qualified to assess it. You graduated near the top of your class. Your division officer says you're the best ensign she's ever had. Those are facts. Your family's disappointment is an opinion. Don't confuse the two. Her eyes filled. Thank you, ma'am. You're gonna be fine, ensign. Better than fine. A month later, the local paper ran a longer feature, a full profile on the Cordell's recent readiness inspection, my operational history, quotes from senior fleet leadership about my reputation for precision under pressure. I didn't send it to my family this time. Someone else apparently did. My mother left a voicemail. I let it sit unheard for 2 days before I finally listened. I saw the article, her voice said, quieter than I'd ever heard it. It's very impressive, Alex. I didn't realize. I don't think I let myself realize. I didn't call back right away, but I didn't delete it either. The real reckoning happened somewhere I never expected. At a Navy Officers Spouses Club luncheon of all places where my mother had served as chapter president for 6 years, a position she treasured more than almost anything in her life. I heard about it secondhand from my father, who heard it from a neighbor who'd been in the room. Margaret Ellsworth, the club's vice president and a rear admiral's wife of 30 years, stood up during the open floor portion of the meeting. According to my father, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Diane, she said, I think we all need to talk about what happened at your daughter's engagement party. Word travels in this community, and what I heard was that you introduced an active-duty Navy captain, your own daughter, as the disappointment in front of a room full of guests, including several Marine officers. This club exists to support the families of people who serve this country. That includes the women who serve themselves. I don't think that's a small thing to overlook. My mother reportedly had no response. By the end of the following month, she'd stepped down from the chapter presidency. Not forced out exactly, but the writing had been on the wall clearly enough that staying on would have meant sitting through months of quiet, pointed conversations she didn't have the stomach for. She never told me any of this directly. My father did, carefully, the way he told me most things, without embellishment, without asking me to feel any particular way about it. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't feel vindicated exactly. Mostly I felt the strange, sad recognition that my mother had spent decades building an identity around exactly the kind of social respectability she'd always told me to chase instead of a career, and it had turned out to be just as conditional as everything else. My father told me one more detail, almost as an afterthought. Margaret Ellsworth had apparently pulled him aside afterward in the parking lot and told him quietly that her own daughter had been an Army logistics officer for 11 years, and that she'd sat through more dinners than she could count where relatives asked when her daughter would get a real job. She said she hadn't spoken up soon enough back then, and she wasn't going to make that mistake twice for someone else's daughter. "Strange thing," my father said. "Woman I'd never say more than a hello to for 6 years, and she did more to set your mother straight in 10 minutes than I managed in 3 decades of marriage." Sometimes it takes someone outside the family to say the thing everyone inside it is too tangled up to say. That's about the size of it. Around that same time, I had dinner with Sarah Whitfield again, this time just to catch up. No case file between us. We sat at a little seafood place near the Embarcadero, the kind of spot where half the customers were in uniform and nobody thought twice about it. "You seem different," Sarah said, picking at a plate of fish tacos. "Lighter, maybe." I stopped trying to win an argument nobody else knew we were having. "That'll do it." She took a sip of her drink. "You know, when we were plebes, I remember you telling me your mother thought the academy was a phase, that you'd get it out of your system and come home to marry some nice lieutenant and settle down." She still half believes that, some days. 25 years, Alex. Command of a cruiser, a star on the way. That's not a phase, that's a life. Try telling her that. I did actually. Ran into your mother at the commissary a few months back before all this happened. She asked me what you actually do all day. I told her you probably briefed more senior leadership in a single week than most captains do in a career. She looked at me like I was making it up. "What'd you say?" I told her to ask you herself sometime. Actually ask and actually listen to the answer. Sarah shrugged. "People hear what they've already decided to hear. Has nothing to do with what you're actually saying." I thought about that a long time after we said goodnight. How much of my life had been spent translating myself into smaller words, hoping the smaller version might finally get through where the true one hadn't. It never had. Maybe it never would have, not with her. But I was done doing the translating either way. The wedding invitation arrived 3 months later, forwarded through my father because Brianna didn't have my current address. Cream cardstock, elegant script, my name spelled correctly for the first time in longer than I could remember. Captain Alexandra Reyes. I held it a long while. Priya found me at my desk, staring at it. "Going?" "I don't know. What's holding you back? I don't want to be a statement. I don't want to walk in and have it be about my rank again." "Then don't make it about your rank. Just be her sister." I'm not sure I remember how to do both at once. She sat down across from me. "Captain, Alex, you've spent your whole life trying to be enough for them. Maybe it's time to just be yourself and let them figure out what to do with that." She was right, though the thought of walking back into that world made my chest tight. Not from fear exactly, more from sheer exhaustion at the idea of performing anything at all, even dignity. I set the invitation down. "I'll think about it." Thinking turned into weeks of avoidance. We deployed for a joint exercise off the coast, 18-hour days coordinating 4 ships through a complex training scenario that pushed every system and every sailor near their limits. It was easier to focus on the mission than on the decision waiting at home. 2 weeks before the wedding, my father called. "You coming?" I sent flowers. "That's not what I asked." "That's not what I asked." "Dad, I don't know if I can sit through it. The questions, the explaining. Nobody's asking you to explain anything anymore. Your mother's learning to be quiet." We had a real conversation after the party. I told her she's got 2 daughters and she's about to lose one of them permanently if she doesn't wake up. His voice carried an edge I rarely heard from him. Should have said it years ago. "You didn't have to." Yes, I did. Come to the wedding, kiddo. Not for them, for yourself. Show up on your terms, leave when you want, but don't skip it because you're tired of fighting. You already won that fight a long time ago. This is just the victory lap. After we hung up, I sat in my stateroom and looked out at the gray water through the porthole. I'd spent 25 years proving myself to the academy, to my commanders, to the sailors under my command. I'd earned every promotion, every responsibility, every star. Why did some small, stubborn part of me still feel like I owed my family proof? The answer came quietly, the way the true ones usually do. I didn't. Not anymore. If I went to the wedding, it would be because I chose to. Because Brianna was still my sister, despite everything. Because some part of me, small but stubborn, still believed in the possibility of an honest family, even now, but I'd go exactly as myself. No apology, no translation, no version of me smaller than the actual size of my life. I texted Brianna, "I'll be there, congratulations." She wrote back almost instantly, "Really? Thank you. That means everything." I didn't tell her I'd be in dress whites. I didn't ask if that was appropriate. I'd simply decided that if I was going to show up, I was going to show up honestly, the same way I'd have shown up to any formal occasion in my professional life. That's not a statement. That's just consistency. The week before the wedding, a message arrived due proper official channels, formatted the way any Marine officer would format correspondence to a senior Navy captain. "Ma'am, I wanted to formally apologize again for my conduct at the engagement dinner. I acted on incomplete information and it was unprofessional of me. I've since reviewed your operational record and I'm honored you'll be attending our wedding. Respectfully, Captain Marcus Hale, USMC." I appreciated the formality, the plain acknowledgement that he'd stepped wrong and owned it without drama. I wrote back, "Captain Hale, your apology is accepted. Looking forward to celebrating with you and my sister. Fair winds, Captain Reyes." Priya helped me press my dress whites the night before I flew down. Nervous? No, just ready to get it over with. That's the spirit. I mean it though. I'm not going in there to fix anything. I'm not going to force some big reconciliation. I'm just going to show up, be civil, and leave when I'm ready. Sounds healthy. Sounds exhausting. She laughed. Most family things are. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the hotel mirror in full dress whites, every ribbon squared away, every crease sharp, my cover sitting exactly right. I looked like exactly what I was, a captain in the United States Navy. Let them make of it what they wanted. The church was small, white roses everywhere, soft music drifting through open doors. I arrived alone, 20 minutes early. People turned when I walked in, not just glanced. Turned? The uniform commanding a kind of attention I hadn't asked for, and, that morning, didn't mind. I found a seat toward the back on the bride's side, far enough not to be in the family photos, close enough to count. An older woman beside me leaned over. "Are you with the groom's unit?" "I'm the bride's sister." Her eyebrows went up. "My goodness, you must be so proud." "I am," I said, and I meant it completely. The ceremony started. Brianna walked down the aisle on our father's arm, radiant in white lace. When she passed my row, our eyes met. She smiled, genuinely the way she used to when we were kids and nobody had taught either of us yet how to compete with the other. I nodded back. The vows were traditional. Marcus's voice was steady. Brianna cried happy tears. My father stood in the front row in his old retired chief's dress blues, and I watched him wipe his eyes during the kiss. My mother sat beside him in pale pink, her posture perfect, her expression harder to read. At the reception, I sat with a table of Marcus's Force Recon teammates and their wives who asked genuinely curious questions about my career, about life at sea, about commanding a cruiser. The conversation was easy and professional and, for once, entirely free of subtext. When Brianna and Marcus made their rounds, Brianna hugged me tight. "Thank you for coming. You look beautiful. I'm happy for you." Marcus shook my hand properly this time. "Thank you for being here, ma'am. It means a lot to both of us." "Take care of my sister, Captain." "I will. You have my word." They moved to the next table and something in my chest finally released. This was enough. This felt like a kind of closure I hadn't let myself expect. My mother approached as I finished my coffee. She looked older than she had at the engagement party, more uncertain. "Alex." She stood beside my chair, hands clasped tight in front of her. "Can we talk?" "Of course." We walked out to the garden, away from the music. The evening was warm, thick with the smell of jasmine. "I've been thinking a lot," she started, "about what I said at the engagement dinner." "Mom, we don't have to." "No, we do. I do." She took a breath. "I called you a disappointment in front of a room full of people, and I was wrong. Your father explained to me, not just the rank, but everything underneath it. The operations, the people who trust you, the lives you've been responsible for." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't know because I didn't want to know. I wanted you to fit into a box, and when you didn't, I decided that meant you'd failed." I waited. Years of practice had taught me to let people finish before I responded. And I want to say, I know I never once asked Brianna why her second marriage ended or her first, but I asked you every year when you'd finally give me a grandchild. Like you owed me something, the rest of the family didn't. Your father pointed that out to me and I didn't have an answer because there wasn't a fair one. There wasn't, I said quietly. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. The apology sat in the air between us. I examined it the way I'd examine any report, for substance, not just tone. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally. I do. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I can't go back to how things were, where I'm constantly proving myself or shrinking my life down to make you comfortable. That version of our relationship is over. I know. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if we can build something different. I'd like to try if you're willing. I thought about it, really thought about it, not as a daughter desperate for approval, but the way I'd assess any operational situation, clearly without sentiment clouding the read. Could my mother change? Maybe. People occasionally surprised you. Was it worth the risk of finding out? I'm willing to try, I said slowly. But it has to be real. No backhanded comments, no minimizing what I do, no comparing me to Bri or to anyone. If you can't do that, I'd rather have distance. I can do that. We'll try then. She stepped forward, hesitant, and I let her hug me. Brief. A little awkward. Real. Across the garden, my father caught my eye through the open doors and nodded once, understanding and approval folded into a single small gesture. I stayed another hour, watched Brianna and Marcus dance, talked with a few more guests. Posed for photos I actually smiled in. When I finally left, the party was still going strong, but I'd done exactly what I'd come to do. On the drive back to the hotel, I felt lighter, not fixed, not healed, just lighter. My phone buzzed. A text from Brianna. Thank you for coming. Thank you for everything. I love you. I pulled over long enough to write back. Love you too. Be happy. It was a start. Maybe just a start, but it was something. A few weeks after the wedding, I flew back to San Diego for a weekend and at my father's quiet suggestion, agreed to a family dinner at his house instead of a restaurant. Smaller, easier to control. Fewer eyes on us. My mother cooked, which she almost never did anymore. Pot roast, the same recipe she'd made when Brianna and I were kids, back before either of us had a rank or a marriage certificate attached to our names, back when we were just two girls at the same table. I looked up the ceremony protocol, my mother said partway through dinner, not quite meeting my eyes. For when you make admiral someday, I wanted to know what to expect, what I'm supposed to do, where I'm supposed to stand. You don't have to memorize protocol, Mom. Just show up. I want to do it right this time. Her voice wavered slightly. I've spent so long not knowing anything about your life that I don't know where to start asking. Start anywhere, I said. I'll tell you. So she asked. Not performative questions meant to fill silence at a party, but real ones. What a typical day looked like, what it meant to stand watch, why deployments lasted as long as they did, whether I was ever afraid. I answered all of it plainly, the way I'd answer a new ensign's questions, and for the first time in longer than I could remember. Nobody at that table interrupted to change the subject to Brianna's salon or anyone's wedding plans. My father caught my eye across the table at one point and gave me the smallest nod. The kind that said, I told you it was worth showing up for. It wasn't a fix. One dinner doesn't undo 25 years. But it was a beginning built on something sturdier than obligation. Actual curiosity, actual listening. The kind of foundation you could maybe build something real on top of if everyone kept choosing it, meal after meal, year after year. Over the following months, my relationship with my family shifted into something new. Not warm, exactly. I'm not going to pretend 25 years of pattern dissolved overnight, but honest. My mother called occasionally with real questions about my work, and actually listened to the answers. Brianna sent updates about married life without the old undertone of resentment. My father and I talked every Sunday, the way we always had. It wasn't perfect. Old habits surfaced sometimes, a pointed comment, a comparison that stung. But when that happened, I addressed it directly instead of swallowing it the way I used to. Mom, that felt dismissive. Bri, I need you to not minimize my work. And, slowly, imperfectly, they adjusted. Meanwhile, command life kept moving. We ran a major joint exercise off the coast that stretched 3 weeks, 12 ships, coordinated operations testing every system and every sailor. I stood on the bridge at 0300 one morning, watching destroyers hold formation under starlight, Priya beside me reviewing the comms traffic. You ever miss the simple days, ma'am? When you only had to worry about your own watch station? Sometimes. But this is better. How so? I gestured at the formation, 1,000 people executing a complex operation without a single error. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because everyone, from the newest seaman to the most senior officer, knows their job and does it well. You don't get that kind of trust for free. You earn it. Every single day, quietly, where nobody's watching. You make it look easy. It's not. But it's worth it. A message came through, an aircraft with a maintenance issue needing to divert. Priya and I worked the problem together, coordinated the response, got the pilots down safely. Just another night at sea. By the time the sun came up, we'd executed 17 separate evolutions without incident, the kind of success that never makes headlines because it's simply what's expected. You're remembered for your failures, not your 1,000 quiet successes. But my sailors knew. I knew. That was enough. 4 years after the engagement dinner, I received the notification I'd been hoping for, but never quite let myself expect. Selection to Rear Admiral, lower half, 1 star. Priya found me staring at the message. Ma'am, you okay? I made Admiral. She grabbed the paper out of my hands, read it twice, and let out a whoop that was thoroughly unmilitary. Holy, congratulations, ma'am. Thank you. You don't look as excited as you should. I'm processing. The truth was more complicated than excitement. I was proud. Genuinely, but I was also thinking about every person who'd never believed I'd get here. Every time I'd been underestimated, dismissed, laughed at across a dinner table. And now I was going to be one of the few women in the entire Navy to wear that star. The promotion ceremony was scheduled 3 months out, formal, attended by senior fleet leadership, open to guests. I thought carefully about who I wanted there. My father, obviously. Priya. Sarah Whitfield. The officers who'd served under me and taught me at least as much as I'd ever taught them. Jasmine Cole, now a lieutenant herself, doing exceptional work of her own. And my mother and sister. Because despite everything, they were still my family, and this moment felt big enough to actually share. I called my father first. I'm getting promoted, Rear Admiral. Silence on the line, then, Alex. 1 star. I heard him take a shaky breath. Your mother needs to hear this. Hold on. I heard the muffled sound of him calling for her, then her voice. Alex, your father says you're being promoted, Rear Admiral, in 3 months. A long pause. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. Can we come to the ceremony? I'd like that. After we hung up, I sat in my office a long while and let myself actually feel it. Not just the professional satisfaction, but the personal weight of it. I'd done this. Not for them. Despite them, for most of it. And now, finally, they'd be there to witness it. Lieutenant Jasmine Cole stopped by my office a week before the ceremony. Ma'am, I wanted to thank you before you transfer out. For what? For showing me this was possible. When I was struggling at the academy, I used to look at the senior women officers and try to picture myself where they were. You made it feel real instead of theoretical. She paused. My mom came to my last promotion, she cried, told me she was proud. That must have felt good. It did, but you know what felt better? Realizing I didn't actually need it to feel proud of myself. I smiled. That's the real accomplishment, Lieutenant. After she left, I thought about all the women I'd mentored over the years, the ones who stayed in, the ones who got out, the ones who found their own paths entirely. Each one had taught me something about resilience, about the particular cost and reward of choosing this life on purpose. The ceremony fell on a clear Friday morning in October. Warm sun, a light breeze off the water carrying the smell of salt. Naval Base San Diego opened a hangar for the occasion, flags and formal seating for 400 guests, officers from across the fleet, civilian leadership, my entire chain of command, and in the third row, my family. My father in his retired chief's dress blues, my mother in a navy blue dress, Brianna beside Marcus. The ceremony followed traditional protocol. Opening remarks, the citation read aloud, the formal pinning of the star. The Admiral presiding said words about exemplary service and distinguished leadership that I only half heard because what I actually noticed was the physical weight of the star as it settled onto my collar. The literal weight of what it meant. My father came up for the pinning. His hands trembled slightly as he fastened it, but his face stayed steady, proud. When he stepped back and saluted, I returned it crisply. Then, because protocol allowed it, I hugged him. "Proud of you, kiddo," he whispered. "Always have been." The reception afterward was a blur of handshakes and photos with everyone who'd helped get me there. My mother approached carefully. "Alex, this is extraordinary. Thank you. I mean it. I had no real concept of what this meant. Not until recently." "Most people don't," I said. "That's not an excuse. I should have known, should have asked." She paused. "But I'm here now, learning. That's all I can ask." Brianna hugged me tight. "My sister, the Admiral. I'm telling everyone at the salon." "Feel free." Marcus shook my hand, formal and warm at once. "Ma'am, it's an honor, truly. I'll be telling the story of that engagement dinner for years, the day I accidentally insulted a future admiral. Let's just say you helped clarify a few things, Captain. Margaret Ellsworth found me briefly during the reception, too, a glass of sparkling water in hand, her husband, a two-star himself, trailing a few steps behind her. Admiral Reyes," she said, testing the title out loud like she was trying it on for size on my behalf. "Your father told me you might not remember the name, but I wanted to say congratulations in person. I know exactly who you are, Mrs. Ellsworth. I owe you a thank you I never got the chance to give." She waved a hand. "You don't owe me anything. I just refused to let something slide that I'd let slide once before, with my own daughter. That's not a favor. That's just decency, arriving a little late." She smiled, something warm underneath the formality. "For what it's worth, your mother's been a different person at the club since, quieter. Better, I think, though I suspect that's still a work in progress." "Isn't it always? Every day I've lived, Admiral. Every single day." She lifted her glass slightly. "Congratulations again, truly. Late in the reception, Priya found me near the edge of the crowd. How does it feel? Surreal? Real? Both? You earned this 20 times over." "Real? Both. You earned this 20 times over." "We earned it. None of this happens without good people around you." Spoken like a true flag officer. She grinned. "So, what now? Probably a lot of meetings. Boring meetings that shape naval operations across the whole Pacific." "Exactly. Boring." We both laughed. That evening, after everyone had gone, I stood alone on the pier and watched the sunset over the water. Gold, then orange, then a deep, settling purple. Somewhere out past the breakwater, ships under commands like mine were standing watch, sailors executing quiet, unremarkable duties that kept entire sea lanes safe. I thought about the young woman I'd been at the academy, ambitious, driven, desperate to prove something to people who weren't paying attention. What would she think, seeing me now? Relieved, probably. Maybe a little surprised. Definitely proud. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to the family group chat, the one I'd left years earlier, quietly rejoined months ago, on my own terms this time. "Thank you for being there today. It meant everything. Love you all." The replies came fast. "Dad, love you, kiddo." "Mom, we're so proud, so incredibly proud." "Bree, best sister ever. No contest." I smiled, pocketed the phone, and walked back toward base, the single silver star catching the last light of the day, my stride steady and sure. I didn't need applause, just respect. And finally, mercifully, I had both. The family that raised me, imperfect as they were, and the family I'd built for myself along the way. The life I'd earned and the purpose I'd served. All of it together. Not perfect, but real. And that was enough. Here's where I'll leave it. I held my ground, kept my dignity, and kept moving forward. If this hit home for you, drop your own story in the comments. Share this with someone who needs a little backbone today, and subscribe for more clear-eyed boundary stories. A few questions for you before you go. When family minimizes what you've built, what boundary actually worked for you? Would you have stayed for that whole dinner or walked out earlier? And if you serve or love someone who does, how do you hold the line between duty and family pressure? Let me know below. I read every one of them.